Okay, we're up and running. So this is welcome to the MaltTravAle podcast. This is probably episode one, or more likely to be our beta. We just kind of trial this, how we go, really. So MaltTravAle, a little bit of a play on words. The three of us are from Malton initially, and we spent the last 30 odd years traveling to sample ales. And that's what the idea of the podcast is initially. Obviously, we're all stuck in lockdown. I'm stuck now in Staffordshire, Bruce in York, and Nick still in Malton.
Hello.
So we are just trying to think about when and if we get released from lockdown, what would make the perfect beer trip. So we've been kind of going on trips mainly around the north, but with occasional soirees to down south and to London, Edinburgh, etc. I say over the last 30 years or so. And we've kind of, I guess, developed our own little bit of a philosophy. I guess the three of us have been kind of hardcore, but along the way, we've had lots of other friends and people, mates, and people who've joined us as well. So we just thought, if anybody be interested, just kind of some ideas about what makes the kind of perfect trip, etc. So perhaps as a way of introducing ourselves, perhaps if Bruce and Nick, perhaps what are you most missing about not going to the pub is probably the kind of key question, isn't it? Bruce, I know and Bruce has just come back from COVID, so he's actually drinking Coke tonight, which is a real thing. But what are you most missing about going to the pub, not going to the pub, Bruce?
I miss that, being able to go out for an hour and a half on an evening, especially in winter. Our second nearest pub is Sam Smith's pub. There's no distractions there. It's got a roaring fire. It's very quiet. We go with two or three friends. It's incredibly calming. It's incredibly relaxing. There's a little bit of crack with the people who go there. And it is just that escape. So I'm sure everybody's thinking the same thing. It's just that total escape for everything for an hour and a half, really, especially with the wife and two children at home. But, you know,
it's almost that murmur in the background, isn't it? You know, even you can go in. Sometimes I go to the pub and sit on my own, but you just got that murmur around you, people chatting and having a laugh, and I think that's what you miss, isn't it? Because like you go out for a walk or whatever, or you go to work and you come back, and what about you, Nick? What you most miss about not going to the pub?
Yeah, well, it's almost being voyeuristic, as you say. You're not necessarily going to the pub to talk to other people, but social media now, people are quite happy to sit there. I mean, we're being partly tonight, but people are happy to sit there for hours and hours and just see what other people are doing and what other people's business is without interacting. And I think it's a change of scenery. Get out there, and I like to think the pubs that I'm going in, are comfortable, they're interesting, and if somebody just walking that. You engage in conversation, whether it be a long chat or just a few words. We're lucky, I suppose. If you were asking that 20 years ago, I'd be saying definitely the choice of beer. It might be controversial again, but the supermarkets have got a good range of real ales now. They definitely have a lot of pubs, but there's now taste better than it coming out of an handful. No matter how fine a bottle or a can might be, there's now better than watching that pipe being pulled and watching the head settle and the head being there all the way down the bottom of the glass. A little bit of head on this pint tonight, but struggling with it, really.
Yeah, we're going to probably have a drink as well on these podcasts. I think, again, we just discussed this really. I guess, although we're all big beer drinkers, I don't think that's kind of the be-all end-all for us. We're not kind of beer geeks, I would say. But we've just been chatting before this that we often went to pubs more for the pub, really, rather than the beer. And I've got to say, sometimes the beer that we had to drink wasn't that great, or there wasn't a great deal of choice. So, but we will be having a drink as well, and I think that's part of it. And I'm getting a bit of a beer snob because I've started my beer tasting course. So I'm currently on Proper Job, which is, I think, a really good ale, a bit of an under kind of value one, really. It's kind of fantastic beer if you get hold of it. You used to be able to get it in the southwest, but you can get it pretty much everywhere now. And this is a really nice, fairly strong 5%, but it just tastes fantastic. And quite a bit of the read I'm doing now, and they do reckon if you do want a decent kind of IPA, this is not a bad one. Nick, what are you drinking tonight?
Well, I had to go with the obvious. When we did start to venture out of Malton, our first destination for a beer trip was looked upon as the Holy Grail in those days. It was Keighley, home to Timothy Taylor's. So I've got a bottle of Landlord with me. That said, got a comment to make about it. Don't think it's as good as it was 20 odd years ago. But that will save for another episode, I think.
Yeah, and I think one of the things that I think we've always talked about, it did always taste better in Keith. It's a bit like Guinness in Dublin. It always seemed to taste better. And I think that's maybe something we might cover perhaps in one of these. And I think often part of our philosophy was if you're going to go somewhere, is try and drink whatever the local beer was. And again, I've got to say, in most cases, that went quite well. I mean, even, you know, if you went to Newcastle, you went to Middlesbrough, if you drank Cameron and so you drank Scottish Newcastle, it actually tastes a lot better, didn't it? And I don't know whether they just serve more of it in that area, and therefore it was getting through the pipes. I don't know.
It was the Holy Grail, wasn't it? Going to bookmakers and for a pack to the tailors though.
Yeah.
Anticipation, it never let you down, did it?
Well, that was when I was asking about your best part, and that always for me, that part of Golden Best in the Bottlemakers Arms in Keighley, which is a great little pub, a very small pub, really. Well, you probably get 10 people, it'd be quite full in there.
Wasn't it, of when you go to Dublin and you go to the pub and you order that first pint of Guinness and it's pouring it, that anticipation, and you see that slightly brown tinge on its head, and you have that first sup, and it's just an amazing moment, isn't it? That Golden Best.
And that was the thick, and both of those pints, like a pint of Guinness in Dublin or anywhere in Ireland, really, and that Golden Best, it seems to be thicker. It seems to be creamier. It seems to, I don't know, it just seemed to be a really fulsome beer. So anyway, that's kind of what we're going to get onto. So what we thought was, as we can't go anywhere at the moment, obviously we are great literacy gurus, the three of us here, not. But we do remember that from English literature, George Orwell obviously talks about in one of his essays this mythical pub, which he called the Moon Under the Water. And I've got to say, there are many very crap Moon Under the Waters that I've been to that I tried to kind of live that dream, and they're nowhere near. The one in Manchester always springs to my mind, the one that's in Piccadilly, which is a hell of a long way from the ideal pub. So Orwell had this idea of Moon Under the Water, and he had these 10 kind of key points. And I did a bit of reading, and apparently, actually, this pub was supposed to be based in London, because somewhere he also mentions that he also has 10 points for a country pub, but those have never been found. That list of 10 key things for that haven't been found. So that's kind of our mythical kind of quest, really, probably over 5 or 6 discussions like this, is to try and work out what we think is the perfect pub. So I'll probably go through the Orwell's kind of what he thought a perfect pub was. And we might just, in this session, just talk a little bit about that and try and kind of spell that into what makes a great beer trip. I think we'll also, over the next few weeks, talk a little bit about, you know, maybe the key questions are how many drinks make a perfect trip. I think Bruce and I discussed this a week or so. We reckon 8 pints is not a bad kind of target token over, say, you know, I don't know, pint an hour almost, one that we used to work on. Obviously, part of all these trips is also traveling. And certainly we've always had the philosophy of trying to kind of use public transport. And again, I guess, well, me and Bruce have to make a confession that when we were younger, we were those train spotter geeks on York Station in our very early teenage years. But there is something quite nice about getting on a rickety old northern train to go to the farther reaches of West Yorkshire or North Yorkshire.
It's all gone now, haven't they?
Yeah, but and the idea about buying one of those kind of rovers that you could jump on a bus and you know, I remember us doing that in London once, but in the good old days. And that idea about just jump on a bus and you see a pub, jump off and have a beer and then get back on the bus. So there is something about that so that transport is quite important as well. And I guess we've always kind of worked out that balance between how much traveling you do and how much drinking you do. and as I put in my notes here, whether you can actually do the both. We've been looking at some of our photos of our past drinking days. And I think actually, I don't know, maybe it was because we lived probably around Leeds and therefore alcohol was often banned on most public transport whenever Leeds United were playing. I don't remember like doing lots of drinking on the train. And I don't know whether that was, sometimes that was because I say it was a match day and therefore it was banned. And obviously we were involved with a miners kind of strike where we were around there. We weren't involved, but we were around, and similar things there. They stopped like people drinking.
No, I think it was more because you had to carry it with you. Once again, the quality of the beers that you were getting out of bottles of cans,
true,
far lower than what you could have in the pub. And as I say, plus we were filling our pockets with pork pies and stuff like that.
Well, we were there. That was it. Travelling was eating.
Beer.
What were them places called on stations? What were they called, that place at York State? What were the net the chain? I can't what they're called now. Something like Rialts or something, but it used to be like £6 for a can of Stella, wasn't it, or a can of Heineken? I don't know. I was getting pretty desperate sometimes in York Station. But we have been on there's a couple of nice real ale trains that we've been on that do have a real ale bar, which is always quite fun as well. And often actually these days, often these days they even have their own beer, don't they? Have a theme beer that you can also drink as you go around as well. Other thoughts were about the kind of, maybe we'll spend a session on planning. That was always quite a good laugh, really. Often probably met in a pub and talked a little bit about where we were going to go. try and plan the route. And we talk a little bit about, certainly for us, it was the good beer guide. And yeah, Nick was tended to buy the copy that we all used, and then we normally lost it somewhere. But again, obviously there are now, beer in the evening we've talked about, Untapped. There's quite a few different ways you can kind of plan journeys now. The beers, although the beers weren't always the driving force, I think, again, obviously that's part of what we do as well. So, and Nick's already mentioned that we come from a kind of a town that's got a fairly strong brewing heritage, and so that was certainly important for us as well. We've already mentioned food and snacks, and often, probably Bruce is the leader in this, we'd often have to swing by. I remember having gone all the way out to Bury to get a black pudding for Bruce at one point. I remember black peas being another one that was a very popular kind of side trap we had to go and find. And certainly savouries and dainties from several bakeries across the north of England we have visited en route, and obviously give us some sustenance.
This is long before I became fashionable, weren't we?
Yeah.
I've got some snacks with me tonight.
Oh, yeah, that's my Christmas present to my brother. So yeah, we haven't worked out yet. Me and Nick are brothers, and I bought Nick we had those in that Titanic pub, didn't we? In that one I took you in Stoke, and it is a ploughman's lunch in a packet. Which again, you get in a few pubs, but I've managed to get him a whole pub card.
It's made by Openshaws of Lancashire. You get 2 cream crackers, 2 silver skin onions, and a triangle of what you could call dairy or Laughing Cow cheese. Now it's all sealed in a bag, but the problem is what you find when you open the bag is the onions have invariably leaked some of the vinegar, so everything just tastes of vinegar. But yeah, if you haven't got decent sustenance to hand, then they do fill a hole as such.
What's the shelf life for that, Nick?
Oh, it'd be long,
probably 2050, Brooks.
It's amazing what you can buy on Amazon these days. It's pretty much the bill end all.
Oh, I better start eating a few more. 20th of Feb 2021.
Oh, you'll be all right. Yeah. Now on my list here, I've got first aid as another kind of area when the alcohol fights back, and I think that is one of the perils, isn't it? And we've all probably suffered from that. That you're looking forward to a great day out, and then for whatever reason, your body chemistry, and you've had about 3 pints, and you're absolutely wangered. So I think we might talk a little bit about that, or when bits. I can recall, I'm sure, when we've all had some ailment where we've had to hobble or hop or drag each other around.
Yeah.
And I've also said we should include a short section on waste disposal here, and I meant that of humankind, especially trying to find a toilet is often one of the other perils of the beer trip, especially on unmanned railway stations in the middle of nowhere when you're dying because you've whacked a pint down to catch the last train. And also famously, Nick, some pubs in Keith that don't seem to have sit-down toilets. And
the volunteers' arms.
if you need to, if you're that way inclined.
It was almost desperate times that day. I couldn't believe that if you've got a toilet the size of a cubicle, you don't put a sit-down toilet in. You put a stand-up urinal in instead.
This day, we don't know if people had to go home to do number 2, then return to the pub.
I've also
you also need an iron lung in the volunteers' arms. Was it the arms or was it the inn? It was probably the smokiest pub I'd ever been in.
Yeah. I've also then got the final pint, and I think often for us that would often be probably back in Sotheby's in Malton, because that was our kind of local booze, and a stagger up from the train or the bus station. So I think that was always quite good. And I think often we often went for something a bit stupid, like an old Bob or something. Went for a 7% as our last pint of the night, which sometimes wasn't always the best idea. And then I've also put there kind of post-ale snacking, and I'm sure there'll be 3 tales about Chinese and things that have been scattered on the floor.
Yeah, the thing with Sotheby's was that obviously the landlord knew that often that we were going out, because he always promised to come on a trip with us, and he never did. But he knew when we were out, so he tolerated us when we got back. I think if we walked into any other pub in town, I think we would have been some clocks that have had far too much, and no, we're not serving you guys.
So that's the kind of plan. And I say I was trying to think about our philosophy really, and my starter was interesting pubs, and I think we've certainly ticked a few of those off in our times, and we could probably talk about places like the Philharmonic in Liverpool and the Gardeners in what's it called, the Gardeners in the one in Leeds, that one that you have to walk miles to. Fantastic interior. Some great Sam Smith's pubs in London. Some of them with the old fantastic mahogany screens, etc.
Well, Sam Smith's all over the country. I mean, if you start with the first point of Orwell, the architecture, he reckons it should be Victorian. Now, whilst quite a lot of it is pseudo now, there's pseudo and pseudo.
Yeah.
You know, and I have to give Sam Smith's pubs the due. If they go in and remodel something, yes, nothing is original, but at least they're using proper wooden materials. Whereas a lot of the other big pub cos are using, basically, it's chipboard, made to look stained, made to look like it has to do. And in a very short space of time, that sort of interior can start getting shabby again. But no, I mean, Sam Smith's, once again, we're quite fortunate. Obviously, oldest brewery in Yorkshire. It's literally, 40 miles away from us. Whilst we don't have any Sam Smith's pubs in Malton, we do have them in the villages around about, and it is amazing how they can manage to keep surviving. But each and every one of them that I've been in has got a character, either the infrastructure, the building, or the people that go in there, often because the drink is very, very cheap, but that ain't necessarily a bad thing, because at least it means you keep getting your locals in there.
Yeah, but it's amazing.
They put a pound on everything after lockdown, didn't they? But there's something quite unique about Sam Smith's pubs. I mean,
there is, but I was just thinking, obviously, round where I am now, we've got nothing. I mean, the nearest one I've got is one in Chester, and there's obviously in Manchester. And then, as far as I know, there's a massive gap then till you get to London. So it's, there's the odd one each in there. It is funny, and it's funny, whenever I go back and have a first couple of pints of Sam Smith's, it always tastes a bit weird to me. I suppose that's just you get used to drinking. I don't know, it's a bit like, I always taste a bit like a Burtonny beer to me, with that slight salt.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Just the same with Wards in Sheffield. If you start the night Wards in Sheffield, you basically, you're all right. If you were on the Stones or on the Tennants or anything else, Whitbread, Tetley's, you went and had a pint of Wards, and it was quite sulphurious. Just like you say, with if you get your Burton beers. But no, if it's beer from the wood, isn't it? Which once again makes it.
So yeah, that was our second thing about beers, and I just interested in pubs again. I think we'll fess up. We did go to Stalybridge refreshment rooms before anybody knew about the Stalybridge refreshment rooms, didn't we? On the old, what is now the classic rail trail. I mean, we were probably there in the bloody early 90s when it was still pretty much two-haired women trying to run it. And I've put here often we did drink beer. We drank Vimto. They used to do hot Vimto or hot Bovril. I can get on the trains as well. And they did black peas as well, which is always quite good. I've got here on our philosophy. It was always about maybe a bit of culture and heritage as well. So I think I was saying to Nick, so if you went to Halifax, you'd always walk to the Peace Hall, wouldn't you? Because why not? It's fantastic to go there. We'd go and look at bloody locks, 5 rise locks at Bingley somewhere. We'd go and look at Saltaire Mill. So it wasn't just all drinking and pubs. I think
indoor markets. We always like indoor markets.
We always tried to have a look about what was going on there.
Often in the search of food, though, Bury Market.
Yeah, I've said that. Decent scran, good chat, and then I put the facial glow at around 6:30. When I think, I always like that's my favourite time when you're drinking. When the sun's just, I mean, it's a bit earlier now, but when you sat in a pub and it's just starting to go dark outside, and you probably had 3 or 4 pints already, and you've just got that nice glow, and you're feeling kind of warm, and your chat's flowing, and you're in that kind of good position. And it's not your round for at least 2 rounds, and
But then as the day wears on, then the time seems to go quicker.
That's true. Perhaps talk about that.
You plan to have an hour in a pub. You get there, you get a drink, you look at your watch, thinking, God, we need to leave. The train's going.
Yeah.
I mean, I remember that we were getting up sometimes at 7, 8 o'clock to get to the furthest point of these.
Yeah.
And then we went there for some breakfast, opening time in the first pub at 11 o'clock, and then we'd work our way back, wouldn't we?
Yeah.
I mean, there were 12-hour days, really.
Yeah.
Well, hang on, Bruce. We were making bacon butties for the train journey.
That's the point,
And I say, I can remember we probably had 2 pints max, didn't we, in most pubs? You probably never had more than 2 pints. And I think that's interesting because I thought about that. We never had halves. I can't remember ever having halves. It was a pint. And I think that's probably changed a little bit now. And I think probably now we probably would have. I mean, certainly I would. I always go for those thirds now, the flights. If you go in a pub and you want to try, certainly a good pub, I'll often now just have those three thirds. I think when last time I was in Whitby, I went to the Whitby tap there on the station, and that's all I did. I just drank flights. It was great because they had some really interesting beers on, all different. And again, the great thing about flights is you get charged the same whether it's 3% or 12%. So it's it's not a bad thing. So, but I can never remember drinking halves. I can never remember.
No, I mean, I must admit, if I go in what I class as my local now in Malton, it's new Malton, and they always have 3 guest ales on, and they're always normally from Yorkshire. And especially if it's during the week, it's nice just to go in, have a flight of thirds, and then choose out of those 3 my last pint. So I'm only having 2 pints, but I get to taste all 3 beers, and I really like it for that, because they always have a light, a medium, and a dark on as well. In terms of your choice and your range sort of thing. And like you say, some nights you want to quaff your thirst. Some nights when it's cold and it's miserable outside, you're quite happy just to settle down with something a bit richer, a bit sweeter, and a bit thicker.
Yeah. I can always remember doing stupid things like going and buying a bottle of whiskey from Morrison's, which I always have in my head.
That was in Bradford.
Bradford.
Before we went to the new beehive. Cheap whiskey and all, horrible.
Yeah.
You could have cleaned paintbrushes out in it.
I remember going to the new beehive, all of us a year ago, and he had a large selection of beers on. Because in those days, if you got many more than 3 or 4 ale ales, that was quite extraordinary.
Yeah.
He got 6 or 7 on, and he had a cat that would go from tap to tap, licking the drips every round.
Yeah,
fantastic.
I mean, he had a Chinese barmaid as well, which was a bit surreal. When you tried to ask her what ale she recommended, bless her, she didn't really have much idea.
I just think about Bruce's point there about we often were kind of when they were, I mean, the good old days when they were kind of undoing the bolts and the doors at kind of 5 to 11, weren't we? And I do wonder, because often we'd be the only people in the pub, wouldn't we, that time? And I do often wonder, A, the quantity of beer that we're having, because they're probably still bloody clean the pipes out. And also whether we missed kind of the real buzz of the pub. And I guess, again, by about 7 o'clock, that's what you'd get, wouldn't you? But to be honest, I guess in sometimes there's pros and cons. It's quite nice of being in some of those pubs you used to go in when it was fairly quiet. And or there was always probably one old boy that always was there at 11 o'clock as well, and was always good to have a chat to and see how they were going, and sometimes buy them a beer and get some out of them. So I think that's kind of our philosophy. So I think we can maybe just mull on that a little bit, and perhaps have a leave the Orwell stuff, and we'll perhaps do that in the next time that we get together. And we can then maybe have a think about those 10 things that you talked about: architecture, pub games, quite enough to talk. We might think some good examples that, again, people might be interested in, where we'd recommend if you wanted to go and find a great pub with a great architecture. We've always mentioned the Philharmonic in thing. Was it the Phoenix you guys were in Preston? That looks, I don't think I've ever been there.
Black Horse.
Black Horse. That looks a very similar kind of
ceramic bar. Yeah, one of very few pubs that has a ceramic bar. And that's one of them. There is one still in Hull, the Polar Bear. Yeah.
What worries me though with those is Robinson's, because I've got to say, it's about the Crown Liquor Bar in Belfast, which is an absolutely stunning pub. But I've got to say, the last few times I've been, the beer has been, and you look at it and you can just see it's falling apart. And I've got to say the same about the Phil as well. The Philharmonic, they have lots of beers on, and I think they just seem to it's a great pub. Bar staff can be okay, but then other times it takes you in to get served, and they're always having a chat with themselves. They have
Nicholson's really, haven't you? Because if you take off the heritage pubs, it's great to think there's some custodians, but then of course you've got these fantastic independent pubs full of heritage that are now becoming effectively.
I need to look at Nicholson's. Nicholson's are Scottish. Are they Scottish kind of home Nicholson's? Are they kind of?
No, they're
Nicholson Butler and Nicholson's.
I've got to, but I'm obviously Nicholson's was before that. I mean,
I think they started that brand.
The ones in Edinburgh. The ones in Edinburgh, I think, are completely. I mean, that one, the
Conan Doyle.
When I've been in there, it's been absolutely stunning. The beer's been great. The staff have been absolutely fantastic there. I mean, again, that's a very popular place, full of Americans and Japanese. The last few times I've been in there, and I've been in there with the bloody Nicholson's vouchers and got, like half food, half price, and free beers. And just fine, they love it. I mean, they often say, "I don't know how to do that," because nobody ever comes with that app, because it's mainly tourists. But the ones that I've been to, certainly in Liverpool and they're the one in Belfast. It's just worries me a little bit about the future of those.
I went to Deacon Brody's bar, with our friend Andrew about, it'll be over 30 years ago now, before it was all gentrified. And they had a couple of like belling cookers behind the bar. And we went up on the old £4 train tickets you got from the Kellogg's tickets, the Kellogg's cereal package, remember? Yeah. And we went in there and we said, "Did you do any food?" And she lifted the lid, she goes, "I've been heating that for 3 days, lads. I need bother with that." And I couldn't believe it became a Nicholson's pub, because it was a real proper, it was probably the only proper old-fashioned authentic booze on the Royal Mile.
Yeah.
Done
I
now,
know
innit?
Nick was reminding us about Whitelocks when in Leeds, which again is
Oh,
the legendary pub, really. And I think it's a legend that's maybe lost a little bit of its stripes now. And to be honest, I think I'd probably prefer to go on the Ship now, which is the kind of next little alley down, isn't it? And going there. But I mean, it was Nick, reminding me that there was literally a big red velour curtain that you pulled back, and there's two little old ladies in there, and these two proper
Old ladies with wraparound aprons on, serving giant Yorkshire puddings.
It was a proper Yorkshire, like Sunday dinner every day of the week with massive Yorkshire puddings and
Yorkshire puddings, all white baked to
beef.
start, and a roast. It was fantastic.
It wasn't it? Like a proper, like, old. I mean, again, you got to think people probably eating that kind of food for the last bloody 200 years, all these kind of big fat industrial, whatever, mill owners or whatever, going in there for several pints of Tetleys and a super slap up beef meal. It wasn't. I mean, that's all just knocked through now, and there isn't a restaurant anymore.
It's not the same. It's why they ever altered, because it was people loved it. People loved it.
I remember also that eclectic beer choice in Whitelocks. It was. I mean, obviously it wasn't a tied house, but I just remember there being so many different beers that you could, and quite probably back in the day when we're talking again kind of late 80s, early 90s, quite a range of beers that you wouldn't probably get anywhere else. Apart from your best bits and your mild and your stout. It was.
Those alley pubs in Leeds. I mean, again, they're just totally unique, aren't they? You've got Ship, Whitelocks, the Sam Smith's one, whose name I forget at the minute. What's the Sam Smith's one called? I forget the name of it now.
Don't know. Well, I know the Ship, and
it's not the Angel, is it?
I think it possibly is, yeah.
Yeah, this is probably go to so many pubs, and depending on the level of inebriation, you don't so much, you remember where they are, you don't so much start to bother about the names.
Well, of course, they don't have a pub sign for the Sam Smith's one, do they?
Well, that's right.
Yeah.
Those alley pubs are amazing.
And again, I said to Nick, I used to write a few things down, but I wish we'd have written more. I mean, and we've been looking at some of the photos that we had, and I wish that we'd have written a few bit. In a way, it was probably cultural history that we were kind of going through really, without really knowing it.
Right.
I mean, it was asking why did we ever first start? Why did we start drinking in like the old men's pubs when we were like 18? I don't know. Just
young fogies, weren't we?
Yeah, we just kind of, I guess, just went that way, didn't we? Really, and
I think we like that friendliness. We like that conviviality, didn't we? They were always quite welcoming. They were always exchanging tales, weren't they, to speak? Yeah.
Well, obviously, you two are older than me, so you were going out first. But I think your peers, Malton was dead, Malton was boring, so they went to the bright lights of Scarborough or York. But you guys weren't ever bothered with that. But because of that, for you to walk into a pub at the age of 17, underage, I mean, in those days, the police were a lot more keen to walk into pubs and check people's ages. They didn't bother with a bloke who had 8 pints of strong arm, sat at the bar, and his car was in the car park. Took no notice of him, but anybody who looked on the age of sort of 25, they were coming up and asking for your ID. And so
I don't remember that. I was never ever. I was thinking more. We lived in a market town, and again, back in the kind of mid 80s. I mean, there was bugger else to do. There was no cinema in There was cinema mall, but it's crap. I mean, you probably wouldn't go to York or Scarborough because you wouldn't probably get back, would you? Because taxi would have cost you like them days. God knows how. Well, there probably wouldn't have been a taxi back anyway. So I think they were. I mean, that's our town, whatever it is, I don't know what 18,000 people, whatever. I mean, there must have been, I don't know, 15, 16 pubs, wasn't there? And then clubs, working men's clubs. And I suppose there was something for everybody. There was a few lively pubs like the Gate and stuff, and then there was like the working men's clubs that did like your stand-up comic, your bingo, and your duet. There was the Mount. I mean, the Mount was a massive.
Bruce will tell us about the strippers.
But I mean, the Mount, Bruce, is where kind of most young people went. Weren't the Mount?
And that was a hotel bar essentially, wasn't it?
I mean, the Bluebell was a rugby pub, but that had like a lot of young kids used to go in the Bluebell as well.
Then a Spotted Cow.
Spotted Cow, yeah. It was. I suppose you just kind of and everybody drank pints, and even the bloody lassies drank pints. I mean, that's what people just drank. And then of course the bottles and stuff began to start, and then
the Golden Ball started with the bottles, didn't they? They had the upstairs bottle bar.
Yeah.
They had the half mini come through the wall, and the trendy drink was the Sol with the piece of lime in top.
And then drinking,
some farmers lads, they didn't even know what a lime was, let alone a bottle of Mexican lager.
Drinking spirits. Even the girls didn't used to drink spirits. They had like half ciders and stuff. I mean, I think drinking like whiskey and gin and vodka, we just didn't do it. You drank beer, cider, Guinness.
I remember us biking. I got bikes to village of Wester, wasn't it? 4 miles from where we lived. And Mrs. Taylor ran the pub would never serve you beer, but that was perfectly acceptable to give a 50-year-old cider.
Outsiders, yeah.
Bizarre, wasn't it? She thought that cider was
Which I think was the same as us in the back room of the Globe when we drank pint bottles of Guinness.
Yeah. 97p a bottle.
Yeah.
But it was funny. I mean, how they were complicit because the phone go, with the landlord saying that the police were coming round. So they'd run across, take your beer off you and give you a glass of Coke.
It wasn't Coke, Bruce. It was Sundela Cola.
Yeah.
I was saying to Nick,
Cola.
when we first went in Sotheby's, Bruce, I reckon old man Sotheby's was still there then. And I remember being in that back room, and he used to turn the light off in that, where we used to sit in that up by the toilet there. And they just sit there with that lights on. There's about 3 or 4 of them sat there drinking God knows. I was trying to think, what did Sotheby's actually sell before obviously the brewery start? I can't remember what beer they used to have in there.
They had Whitbread Trophy on.
Yeah.
And,
they had Tetleys on, didn't they? Because they always had Tetleys on.
Tetley,
And maybe a John Smith's on keg.
And I say, that's the
Yeah.
They were really at the forefront of the railway revolution, they weren't they? Really?
Absolutely, yeah. Well, I'm saying to Nick,
given the due, I mean, when they started the brewery up, obviously it was Jeff Woolens and Colin Sykes. Both had, Jeff was a professional brewer. I mean, he'd been assistant head brewer at Bass Brewery for many years, I think, if I'm right in saying. And Colin was a serious home brewer. And when they set the brewery up and started to produce their beers, they were producing award-winning beers. I mean, in those days, it wasn't that normal for a pub to have a brewery behind them. You know, they really were at the forefront of microbrewing. And then obviously Neil took it over, and for many years the beer was still head and shoulders against the big Yorkshire breweries that they had to compete with. Because I mean, that was the thing in Malton. We didn't have a bad choice of beers. You know, we could try the biggest Yorkshire brewery beers: John Smith, Sam Smith, Tetley's, Webster's. You get Webster's at the Railway Club. So, you know, compared to a lot of other places that really were locked down by tied houses and tied pubs, we had the range and choice. But I remember, because obviously I was weaned on the stuff, the Double Chance was head and shoulders above anything that the big Yorkshire breweries were producing.
Yeah, it was incredibly hoppy, wasn't it, when you look back now?
Right, I'm just conscious we're probably moving on now, things that, again, are probably quite local to us. So one of the things that we're going to try and do is, alongside this, is do a bit of a blog so we can maybe talk a little bit more about and give a bit more detail about brewing and pubs that we're talking about as well. So I think we're probably going to draw this to a close now. And I say, if you kind of enjoyed listening to this, then I think what we're going to do next time we meet is we're going to have a look at that George Orwell's 10 great things about a pub and try and link that to our beer trip, really. So we're hoping that we can develop this a bit further. We've got some ideas maybe about YouTube. We do have a Twitter handle, which is malt under dash, whatever you call that, low dash ale. So again, if you want to give us a follow for that as well. So I think, gents, we'll say good night for now, and then we'll hopefully catch up in a week or so's time and carry on this chat and work out things like how we can maybe put some of this in writing. So we'll do a blog, and Nick's already started writing some things down that might, if you're interested in some of the things we're talking about certainly about malt and some of the beers and the bars we've mentioned, you could perhaps do a little bit of research all yourself. So I think we'll say good night, everybody, and then I'll just stop record.
Cheers.
What do we think?
How long was that? About 45 minutes.
I haven't stopped recording yet. I've lost my Zoom off my screen. Hang on. Meeting controls. I'm going to stop sharing. Right, exit now. Recording. Right.